Yo, yo, yo. Yo, yo, yo. Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. It is I, Brian Forbes. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is The Black Factor. And of course, you can catch this show on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube as a bonus. And let me give a shout out to my Oh So Smooth radio family that are in the building this evening on my Wednesday simulcast. Oh So Smooth Radio. And look, y'all, you can get your Oh So Smooth Radio app from the iTunes Apple Store and the what do they call it, the Play Store for your Android. But you can get that Oh So Smooth Radio app and hang out with us on that network. Shouts out to my man DJ Shorty Smooth all the way in Chi-Town. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's show. I'm gonna try not to make it one of them long marathon shows, but you know what I missed last week, unfortunately, y'all have to forgive me for that. We had some technicals. I was doing some stuff here in the studio and working on some projects and hooking things up. I see we got Mr. Michael W.B. Reese in the building. Mr. Big Nate Hampton is in the house. Val Wells, my number one fan, is in the building. It's good to see y'all. I missed you last week, and I can't go this long again without as a matter of fact, I'm gonna tell y'all right now what I'm thinking about doing. In fact, I'm going to because I wanted to cut back the show days only because it's an awful lot of work. But I'm missing too much stuff, so I can't go too long. I can't be going this long without bringing the info. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start doing little small things probably during the week. And then we're going to do a regular Wednesday show. Then that way we kind of stay informed because there's stuff that goes on, man. And, it hits the, airwaves and we got to deal with it. We can't just let stuff, just go. We got to deal with it, man. So y'all don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Don't forget Facebook family, share the live, tell a friend and let them tell two friends and so on and so on. You know the commercial. Y'all know how it go. This is The Black Factor where perspective is everything. And just so you know, the truth does not care about your feelings. We're going to talk about what's real in here today. So, with that said, y'all going to love today's show because I'm going to tie what's going on right now in our political system and our social circles with a bit of history like we always do, and it's going to blow your mind. Trust me on this one. You're going to see. It is no joke out here, y'all. So All right. Now, look here, y'all. Before we get going real good, because I'm going to get into this thing, and it's going to get real, real deep right quick. This is a public service announcement. Y'all leave Sha'Carri Richardson alone. See, I heard some of y'all out there running your mouth, talking about my girl and her orange hair, and talking about somebody even said she looked like a man. Let me tell y'all something right quick. Y'all gonna raise up off my girl. Because my first thing that I'm gonna say to you is, can you run faster than her? Because if you can't, guess what? She might catch you and whoop yo. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm saying? You might not want to be testing that water, even though she a little shorty. She like 5'1". But dig this. This is Black Girl Magic in motion, y'all. The 21-year-old sprinter, right? She just real hard this weekend. She won the 100-meter heat, and she got her spot in the U.S. Olympics team. She going to be in Tokyo, y'all, running for America. Now, it has been said she is the fastest woman in America. So deal with that. Deal with that however you choose. But just know, she in the building, and she got it going on. My man Ernest Jones is in the building. Tiffany is in the building. Hey, Tiffany. Good to see y'all. My man Darius. AAA. Andrew Antonio Allen is in the building. Man, it's good to see. See, I like it when them old heads come through because they got that. They know that history. They got that knowledge. And my man got some years on him, y'all. That's an elder right there, just for the record. So anyway, I just want y'all to raise up off my girl Sha'Carri. She going to the Olympics. You ain't faster than her, so stop it right now. She going to do the thing. And right quick, also, let me give a RIP, a rest in peace, rest in heaven, to John McAfee, who was found dead today. If y'all don't know who John McAfee is, maybe you got too many viruses on your computer, because that's the dude that came up with the way to keep all them infiltrators out your computer. You know what I'm saying? He go back to when this whole thing, first jumped off. He kicked it in the tail real good, and he got real rich, and he went real crazy. So I don't know what happened to him. I haven't heard the story yet, but y'all know what it is. Anyway, so the Senate, y'all, this week, they blocked legislation. Well, should I say the Republicans in the Senate blocked legislation for them to have the opportunity to discuss, not to do anything, just to discuss the voting rights and the ability for us to continue to maintain our voting rights in America. And they shot that down. Now, they used this whole filibuster thing, with the whole 60 votes. And, the filibuster is a problem as far as I'm concerned. It's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like the Electoral College. They're there, and we don't pay a whole lot of attention to them until something happens. And this is one of those situations where, legislation that should be addressed, and should have been addressed decades ago, is being passed over because of this. Well, it's the same thing with the Electoral College. The Electoral College and the filibuster keep losers from losing. I mean, let's keep it 100. Donald Trump, in the very first election, did not win the election by popular vote. He won because of the Electoral College. The filibuster gives people an opportunity to say no to something that they don't like as a group. And we watched the partisan group in our Senate basically say, you know what, the hell with y'all's voting rights. We're going to do what we're going to do. But check this out. I'm getting ready to show you how, we all think these things are different and stuff changes. I'm going to show you how it doesn't. I'm going to take you all the way back to 1920 on today's show, and I'm going to show you how nothing has changed. Nothing. And it bothers me when we don't understand the necessity for our vote. The filibuster has been used throughout history to deny black people equality, justice, and freedom. And in fact, it was used in 1983, October of 1983 to be exact, by Senator Jesse Helms to block the MLK federal holiday. Yep. He finally, stepped away from that, but it was used for that very purpose. And Chuck Schumer today, yesterday, rightfully said that about the nation's most sweeping, this has been the nation's most sweeping voter suppression in 80 years. And that the Republican leader uses the language and the logic of the Southern senators in the 60s who defended states' rights, and it is an indefensible position. Now, we did a show some time ago where we talked about states' rights. And basically, he just called Mitch McConnell a racist without just flat out saying, hey, man, you're a racist. He hit him with the shade. He got shaded out. You know what I'm talking about? But then the funny part was Mitch McConnell turned around and said nothing is broken in America. Nothing is broken in America. Well, if nothing is broken in America, why are they constantly making new laws to change the voting rights? If it's not broken, why are they trying to fix it? See, this is the hypocrisy of politicians in general, but particularly the Republican Party. And all of it is based on a lie that a psychopath created because he can't stand to lose. He's a loser. And he's proven it time and time again, no matter what he says. He can't pull a Muhammad Ali on me. You can't keep telling me you the greatest and you ain't done nothing. Muhammad Ali at least did something. You dig? He said he was the greatest and he meant it. Just because you say it, it don't hold water with me. But then the thing about this, and I just talked about Jesse Helms holding up the MLK holiday legislation with a filibuster. Here's the slap in the face for the month, for the year, for the decade. They now have made Juneteenth a federal holiday. Now, somebody help me out. Did we ask for Juneteenth to become a federal holiday? Did black people say, man, we want Juneteenth to be a federal holiday? No. Black people said we want some equality. We would like reparations for those centuries of work for free. We would like some consideration for our contributions in this country. We would like equal justice. We would like police reform. I could think of several other things. That's what we asked for. But I guess they figure, what the hell, give them a party. Y'all got the day off. How's that? And I guarantee you, if you ask some white folks, they gonna tell you, oh, you got reparations. Y'all had a black president and now you got Juneteenth. That's what they gonna tell you. Trust me. Ask me how I know. Anyway, we get to have a party, y'all. And speaking of reparations and Juneteenth, y'all, check this out. So over the weekend, I was in Houston and I met a man who I hope to have on this show very soon. Very intriguing dude. And he broke some stuff down to me about property and our ancestors in this country that blew me away. And it's going to blow you away too. Man, it's deep. And it's amazing what we don't know. And this is why, for example, I do this show. This is why I do the things I do, because there's so much stuff that we don't know. So I figure, what the hell, I do the homework and I bring it to you. All you got to do is listen. Pay attention. You know, y'all hear me say that all the time. Pay attention. Now, part of the reason why they're avoiding the current topic of critical race theory has much to do with what this man was explaining to me. And as well as suppressing our votes. All of the different massacres that have taken place across these United States that never make the history books, that you only find out about on shows like this and through people like myself and people who are willing to discuss the realities of what our people have gone through and the destruction of the family and the removal of generational wealth from us. And I'm going to continue beating that generational wealth drum for some time to come. And there's a reason why, and this guy is going to be a part of that. This is what's bringing me to today's topic, which is critical race theory and the 1920 Ocoee Massacre. Now, a lot of people never even heard of the Ocoee Massacre and didn't even know that it took place. We just know that there have been a ton of massacres across America, which, if you look in the history, not the history books, because they don't really put it in the books, but if you look into the history, you'll often always see it referred to as race riots. Now, I don't know if that's a proper term when the people that are doing the rioting are white and the people that are dying from it are all black. That's a massacre. That's not a riot. That's what that is. Anyway, I'm doing this story today for two reasons. I'm going to show you why white racist Republicans don't want critical race theory discussed. They don't want it in the schools. They don't want anyone to know anything about it. And if you notice, every time black folks bring up anything that has to do with us understanding the truth, checking our history, and knowing what's going on, somebody on that racist side of the fence decides to hijack it and add their own twist to it. Kind of like how when Colin Kaepernick took a knee, silently took a knee, never opened his mouth, never said a word, just silently took a knee. And all of a sudden it became, he's disrespecting the flag, he's disrespecting the military and blah, 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 blah. They made up everything they could think of to figure out a way to dehumanize and disenfranchise him and anything that he did. And when they're constantly running around here right now talking about cancel culture and how Donald Trump should still have his Twitter account and all this cancel culture. But nobody said a word about cancel culture when they were canceling Colin Kaepernick, when they were depriving him of his career and ability to make money. Nobody said anything about cancel culture when they made up their own theory as to why he was doing what he was doing, despite anything that he said about what he was actually doing. See, these are racists. They can't help it. This is the way they're built. They got to hijack every instance. They get upset when you uncover their racist and hateful and inhumane ways. It's in their DNA. Just the other day, that senator from Arkansas, Josh Hawley, he made a statement and he said that he didn't want little white children to grow up hating themselves because of they think that they've done something wrong. What he doesn't want is for little white children to feel the sting of truth. He doesn't want little white children to suffer from what they actually did do to little black children by making them believe that they were inferior, by making their ancestors believe that they were inferior, and letting that manifest throughout the generations. He doesn't want that for little white children. Of course not. I don't blame him. But the fact is, that's not what critical race theory is about. Critical race theory is about people understanding the truth about the realities of what took place coming forward. The truth does not care about your opinion. The truth does not care about your feelings. The truth is the truth, unequivocally, period. Full stop, the end. And the truth is sometimes very ugly. And he doesn't want little white children to be exposed to the ugly truth. He doesn't want the world to be exposed to that truth, to the reality of the evil and the dangerous ways that this system has handled black folks throughout its history. He don't want them to know about the evil people who control this system, who continuously make it their business to keep other people oppressed by making voter laws for stuff that doesn't even exist. Now, you got people, I listened to a guy the other day on another radio show, and he was going on about saying that they were doing all of this stuff because of well, it's common sense. I have yet, and I know it's ridiculous, there's no need for us to continue to ask idiots to do anything, but I've yet to see any evidence produced, not one shred of evidence from anywhere throughout the United States that anything about this election was off. And they just keep pushing this conspiracy. It was stolen. They're going to find all of these ballots, all of this and that, doing all these fake audits. But what's even worse than the liars and the cheaters are the people who are dumb enough to buy into it. See, what they've been selling all this time is actually fear. And you got some people that are in the market for that fear. They want something to be wrong, so they'll have something to raise up about. And it's been that way throughout the history of this country. They're selling that fear. A lot of people don't even know. And that's why I do this. And guess what? I ain't scared. I'm going to tell it. They're going to sell you some fear. They're going to sell everybody some fear. They're going to sell, like Donald Trump said, the suburban white women. He was saving them from who? Not to mention the fact they ain't the only ones in the suburbs. Ha, he need to do his homework. And the second reason that I am doing this particular topic is because Congress dropped the ball. I'm sorry, the Senate dropped the ball. And because they won't have this hearing. And they're using these lies to maintain only one thing: white supremacy. They can put on suits and dress up and look real cute and run around and pretend like they're not white supremacists. They, in fact, are. The very places that they have protested the vote and continue to say that there's something wrong, but they can never tell you what it is, that they continue to say, use common sense. Guess what? I don't know what they call common sense where you come from, but where I come from, common sense tells me that if you can't provide proof or any evidence of what you're saying, then you're wrong. Threats and intimidation and murder, they still on the table for them, but it's less likely to happen these days. They no longer have that physical upper hand, so to speak. In today's society with liberal whites and social media, and it won't be nearly as easy as it once was. We have more on our side and people who are less afraid of that same old tactic. It's kind of like if a white guy runs up to you, and I actually had this happen one time. Well, he didn't run up to me because that would have been a mistake. But I had a guy on a CB radio one time. You know, they get real bold when they're behind a radio or like, you know, behind the internet, behind the keyboard. And it's like a white guy saying, nigger. Well, my answer to you, Mr. White Guy, is this is 2021. And if you believe that that antiquated word and the ideology behind it is going to move me, I'm sorry. No. And I will not shrink myself in order for you to digest the things that I have to say. I'd rather you choke on my words and the largeness of what I am. Choke on that, because I won't be shrinking me no time soon. The new talking point for the Republican Party about this particular topic is states' rights. They want the federal government to stay out their house, stay out their backyard. They want them to keep everybody out of their different respective states, which is not a bad thing. However, let's talk about states' rights. It's the very same constitutional amendment that was put into place for one sole purpose. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was to maintain slavery. Now, a lot of people like to try and pretend that that's not the truth, but it is. States' rights was necessary, not for the preservation of freedom, but it was for the freedom to continue to maintain slaves. That idea came from the southern states. That's why you have that particular amendment, the 10th Amendment, right? Which takes us back to the Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment was put in place, and it says to maintain a well-regulated militia and the right to bear arms, in short. But we know that the well-maintained militia were the slave catchers. I'm gonna redo that show. We did a show last year because I got to bring that back up. I need that stuff to continue to be put out there, but I'm gonna bring it back, where we discussed how the militias turned into your police departments and how we right now today are still under that boot of those individuals because of their current behavior and behaviors that have not changed since slavery. Anyway, those slave catchers, and we have to be prepared for what's coming. Anyway, so that Second Amendment allows you to have the right to bear arms, right? Okay, now, what do these two have in common? And why do they keep coming up? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the Second Amendment allows those who are in the oppressive position, not the oppressed, but the oppressors, because the Second Amendment allows people in favor of slavery and oppression to protect their rights to the 10th Amendment, the right to do whatever you want in slave states, and the right to do whatever you want now all across the country. The right for states to have their own say-so, states' rights. They can protect states' rights by using the Second Amendment with the right to bear arms and to protect against enemies, foreign and domestic. by law. Not necessarily by force, but this is a law that allows them to see. You gotta look at how this works. Now I'm getting ready to wrap it up for you on that. Check this out. This is why you don't see any change in the gun laws. This is why the gun laws will never change, because that effectively gives power away from those who use that same leverage to maintain white supremacy. They're not going to get rid of the guns, baby. It's not going to happen. You better get you some. That's all I can tell you. Without the freedom to bear arms, they have no leverage. How many places have you ever seen on this planet where colonizers, racists, whatever you want to call them, how many places have you seen them take, destroy, colonize without weapons? None. Not one. You ain't never seen the colonizers go nowhere on this planet and take over nothing without superior firepower. Not in our lifetime. Not in the last century. The last 3 centuries. They had guns. These are the people who are going to maintain those guns. That's what they're maintaining them for, to preserve their freedoms, which means you ain't got a shot. You better get you one. You better get you some. And you better find out about some unity and making sure that there's another group of people who got as many guns that are prepared to stand up against it. That may sound harsh. That may sound, let me tell you what it is. It's predictive. Now, you do what you want with that. So, this brings me to a gentleman by the name, and if you never heard it before, I'm about to bring it to you now. Gentleman by the name of Julius July Perry. Now, Julius July Perry, I want y'all to know, died the day after the election in 1920. November 3rd of 1920 was when he was murdered. But we're going to get to that. Julius, I'm going to call him July Perry, came to Ocoee, Florida from Travelers Rest, South Carolina. And he had hopes of success in Reconstruction era Florida. He traveled with his friend Mose Norman and Valentine Hightower. So he and 2 of his homies left South Carolina and they went to Florida to seek their fortune, which they did, as a matter of fact. They worked hard, and in the coming years, it had become a place with a thriving black middle-class community. It was beginning to blow up. You know, sort of like the Black Wall Street that we talk about. Everybody talks about Black Wall Street, and we, you know, that because that was a massacre. It was devastating. However, we had a place like Ocoee, and let's not forget Oscarville, Georgia, that we discussed on the last show, where we talked about how the white folks ran all the black folks out of there. Well into the 80s, nobody black lived there. There was not a vote in that area, nothing in Oscarville, Georgia. Well, same thing. Ocoee, Florida. Now, even though they had the middle class community and things were thriving, they still had their, Jim Crow and racism was still a thing, right? So by 1920, there were 1,000 residents, and it was an unincorporated town. And almost half of those 1,000 residents of Ocoee, Florida, were all black. Almost half. So, and also, in that same year, 1920, this was the first time women had the right to vote. Now, throughout the South, Republicans worked with prominent local black leaders on voter registration drives within their communities. They spread the word, signed people up, and in some cases, had to pay poll taxes. Voter suppression again. You see, poll taxes were put in place to keep black folks who couldn't afford to vote from voting. See that? Yet another attempt at voter suppression. See, you got to understand, voter suppression been going on since the beginning of the freedom of slaves. And let's not forget, when we talk about Juneteenth, that in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was put into place. But let's not forget that slaves in Texas were not freed until 1865. The military had to come in and make that happen. That's how much they wanted to hold on to that free labor that we're still owed for. You know, those reparations we've been talking about, not the Juneteenth holiday, but the reparations. You know, the money that we're owed plus interest. Oh, and we ain't gonna get into the land that was stolen. Oh, and the mineral rights with that land. Plus interest to date. Oh, baby. You want to know why they don't want to talk about critical race theory? This is why. Because the minute they start talking about critical race theory, it brings up all these other things and these incidents where you start digging. You start, well, wait a minute. If these people got their land snatched away from them, then do we need to go back and see? Do they still own this land? Does this land still belong to them? See, because let me show you something. A lot of people would believe that by taxes, a person could take over some land. Well, there's some states where prior to certain years, they're tax exempt, which also means that their ancestors are entitled to not only that property, but the mineral rights of that property. See, this is what I learned. I learned this weekend. I told you I met the man, and he was running game to me, man. He was telling me some real deep stuff. And he said part of the reason why Oklahoma, the Tulsa massacre of Black Wall Street, was swept under the rug for so long was because so many black people owned so much land and property out there that they drilled on, that they never sold the mineral rights to, that the families and ancestors are still entitled to that money. See, they don't want you to know that, because when these things start popping up, it turns into a problem for others, and it's getting ready to be even more of it. It's coming, y'all. So, voter registration. They spread the word, signed people up, and of course, like I said, paid poll taxes and encouraged them to turn out on election day. Now, there was a judge, a white judge in Florida. He lived in Orlando. His name was John Moses Chaney. He assisted heavily in voter registration of blacks. The voter registration efforts intensified approaching the 1920 elections. Chaney, the wealthy owner of Orlando Power and Light, was also an aspiring politician who was running for Senate. He would need a major helping hand from black voters if his campaign were to have any hope. So in other words, he was doing like a lot of these white politicians who, you know, they need that black vote. And this is yet another point, another sticking point in proof that black votes matter. People keep talking about it don't matter, it don't matter. Trust me when I tell you, Joe Biden wouldn't be in office today without the black vote. Y'all need to understand that. And that means that we have the ability to get something for our votes. Get people in office who have our best interest at heart. People who are going to put things in place that will protect us like they're protecting the Asians and the LGBT community. See, now we can actually get the anti-lynching law passed after its 200 tries already. Yeah, see, a lot of people don't know that. They have tried to put the anti-lynching bill into law 200 plus times throughout the history of the end of slavery, and it still has not passed. But Asian people are protected. The LGBTQ community is protected. Imagine that. Anyway, what is old becomes new again. None of the fear-mongering you see from Trump and the Republicans of today is any different than the Democrats of the 1920s. They the same party. They changed names, but they the same party. Newspapers, the dominant form of media at the time, now we have Fox News, played a major role in firing up the conservative Democratic base. Those are your Republicans today. Great fear and uncertainty were sparked in whites around the state by inflammatory headlines of how the Negro population would soon take over and democracy would be overrun by servants and cooks. This exacerbated the angst of many local whites, and especially who? None other than the Klan. Dun, dun, dun. Who sought to maintain both white and Democratic dominance in state and local politics. See? The Klan is still trying to maintain dominance in politics, just in case y'all didn't notice. Blacks, they felt, were beginning to reach above their station and needed to be cut back down. Oh, you're not supposed to have that car, nigga. No, no, no. We get that from the police right now today. Oh, I've been pulled over for having a car that was just too nice. Yeah. Anyway, in the weeks leading up to the 1920 election, the Klan sent threatening letters to Cheney. They still do that. Y'all hear about all the death threats that the politicians get and have gotten since this insurrection? They're still at it. Fellow attorney William O'Neill and other Republican leaders, they all got these death threats and letters. They ordered them to stop the voter registration campaign or face the consequences. With the warnings ignored, the Klan was further enraged. Now they really mad. Who do we see sending death threats to politicians and leaders today? I'll wait. Exactly. On November 1st, day before election, robes and crosses, the Klan paraded through the streets of the two black communities in Ocoee late into the night. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'll give you a quick. Ocoee was set up where black folks lived either north of the downtown area or south of the downtown area. There were two different communities. One was Baptist, one was Methodist. That's basically the way it breaks down. The white folks lived in the middle in the downtown area. Okay. So the Klan made it their business to parade through both the black communities. Okay. With megaphones, they warn that not a single Negro will be permitted to vote. See, they of course, were much bolder then because the law was more on their side and they didn't have enough white people. White folks were scared of them just as much as black folks were, so they weren't going to go against it. Today we have people running around here making light or clowning and talking crazy about the major cities because these major cities, being predominantly black, made up the majority of votes that allowed Joe Biden to win. Now they're mad. See, in other words, not a single Negro should have been allowed to vote. And if any of them dared to do so, there would be dire consequences. And so now they are going to attempt to give us dire consequences for our votes. That's what you see coming. Trust me. This is what we refer to as voter suppression. Only this form is rooted in violence. January 6th comes to mind. Election day came, and at least some blacks did attempt to vote in Orange County. However, none were permitted. None could enter their respective polling places. White enforcers camped out around the centers, and poll workers were given instructions to deflect their attempts. So the poll workers were intimidated. They probably didn't have to be intimidated, but were told not to allow blacks to vote. And then they had people standing around out there with guns threatening black folks if they voted. This is one of the reasons why today we have a law in place where you can't be within a certain distance of the polls with certain behaviors and paraphernalia, particularly signs, political signs, and things like that. One by one, would-be black voters were turned away, either by threats of violence or by poll workers who found their names mysteriously absent. Does that remind us of how they are going through the voter rolls and expelling people's names from those voter rolls? Sound familiar? See, none of this is new. These are all old tactics with new clothes on them. As they say, the new Jim Crow. Somebody put that in the feed here. Yeah, exactly. So mysteriously, they were absent from the voter registration rolls. Pollsters instructed them to get documentation from Notary Republic R.C. Bigelow to verify that they were actually, indeed, registered voters. However, conveniently, R.C. Bigelow was unable to be located because he was out on a fishing trip that day. Isn't that just so damn convenient? Imagine that. With little other option, most returned to their homes without casting their ballots. Mouse Norman would not be so easily. Mose. That's his name, Mose. Mose Norman. That was July's homie that came with him from South Carolina. He wasn't going to be deterred. So after they turned him away that morning in his precinct in Ocoee, he went to Orlando. And he went to go talk to the judge. Remember the judge we talked about, Judge Cheney? He went to go see Judge Cheney. The attorney instructed him to write down the names of any African Americans who were not permitted to vote, and also the names of the poll workers who had denied their constitutional right to vote. Cheney said a lawsuit against the county would be brought to contest this violation. Norman returned to Ocoee with these instructions, along with a handful of black citizens again seeking to vote, which resulted in the massacre of the black people of Ocoee. So they went down there after again being forcibly turned away. He demanded the poll workers give them their names. He was like, man, give me some name. You know how we do when people get pulled over by the police? What's your badge number? What's your name? You know, they kind of did one of them numbers. And he said, we will vote, by God. So you gotta learn to pick your battles. I'm not saying that the brother didn't do right. He did right. It's just, and at the time, it was revealed that he supposedly had a loaded shotgun. Now, does this sound familiar? He had a gun. See, this same story, y'all. It don't change. We talking about 1920. It's 2021. The same tactics are used every day. He had a loaded gun. Now they never did determine whether the gun was on him, which why would he be walking around with a 12 gauge, or in his car. But the point was, here we got a reason. He got a gun. So an altercation ensued. He was overpowered and beaten by the butt of his own gun. And I doubt that's probably true. They probably beat him with one of their own guns. But we know how history is. And until the lion is capable of writing and telling the story, the hunter will always prevail. So he escaped. He got away with the help of some of his friends. And they say possibly a man by the name of Reverend Edward Franks. He was one of the people who had the church there. As Norman fled, the now inflamed group of whites, largely Klansmen, of course, convened about what to do about the situation. They determined that they had to bring Mose Norman to justice and set an example for any other blacks who dared threaten their white democratic monopoly on local authority. Sounds like what we're dealing with today. The idea that the monopoly on authority in this country is being challenged. And this is why you're witnessing the amount of nonsense that's taking place politically and in the police departments locally, because they are losing and they know it. Outraged, yet fearful, Norman visited the home of his good friend July Perry. The battered farmer showed Perry a note he had from Cheney about their legal rights and recounted what happened that day. There was a tense urgency as the two sensed something terrible was about to go down. It's about to go down. Now, let's do a little bit of homework here. July Perry had become a very well-respected sort of godfather of the community. He was a deacon in the church and a local labor leader, what they used to call a straw boss. So he had juice. Well, not only did he have juice, he had loot. The man was paid. And it was said that anyone seeking to employ black laborers needed to speak with him first. He was an admired, brave, and rational thinker, a sort of civil rights leader before there was a civil rights movement. He encouraged young blacks to be educated and stand up for themselves as first-class citizens. Now, Perry's wife, Estelle, his 3 sons and daughter, Coretha Perry Caldwell, lived on a large estate that included their home and several barns and outbuildings. They regularly opened their doors to anyone in need. If anyone was in trouble, they knew they could find advice and sanctuary in the Perry home. So see, Perry, July Perry, he kind of came, he became a baller. He had land. He had tracts of land and orange orchards. And so did his partner, both his homies. They all came up together and they all got paid together. It was a beautiful thing. Meanwhile, Mose, who was 59 at the time, because July was 50, Mose Norman and his wife, Elisa, liked to live a little more lavishly, enjoying the fruits of years of hard work from farming. They had a 100-acre family orange grove. See, they was balling, Jack. He drove around the brick-paved streets of downtown, which we know is all white, proudly sporting a fancy 6-cylinder Columbia convertible with white sidewall tires and silver spokes. My man was doing it. Unlike his two friends, Valentine Hightower, that was their other homie, had a much more low-key personality. He knew well the dangers of Negroes, that Negroes open up for themselves when they get too uppity. Yeah, he was trying to stay in a lane. I ain't gonna say in his lane because he shrunk himself so that those white folks didn't choke on his large stature. In the still very white supremacist society of the time, he and his wife lived a modest lifestyle and raised their kids to mainly keep to themselves. They answered politely when spoken to and preferred not to draw too much attention to themselves. The son, Hightower's son said that my father was kind and humble. He didn't take no chances on nothing. Smart man, especially in that environment. As the summer of 1920 rolled around, July was still feeling that same kind of optimism about the future that he had when he first arrived, and for good reason. Business was booming. His orange and cucumber harvests were bigger than ever. An upcoming November election had everyone in the black community hopeful that they might see the first ever Republican-elected Florida Senate. See, you got to remember, y'all, if you do your history, you'll know that all the way up through the 60s, the late 60s, black folks were Republicans, like black folks mostly are Democrats today. There was a switch, and you have to do your history on that. We ain't going to get into that tonight. Opposite of today's party paradigm, the political arena in the South of the early 20th century was dominated by white Democrats, which would have been your Republicans during that time. Sometimes known as Dixiecrats. Now, the Dixiecrat thing, so you do that whole thing, you find out where the shift came, and the Dixiecrats are when the shift started. Conversely, the states north of the Mason-Dixon line were Republican strongholds. Blacks, if involved in politics at all, were almost exclusively Republican. See, told you. The group's leader, this is the folks that chased after Mose, a military veteran and former police chief of Orlando named Sam Salisbury, knocked on the door of the wood-framed home. Perry knew they were concerned and reluctantly answered the door. The officer insisted that Perry come with him, to which the 51-year-old replied, "Yes, sir, boss. Let me get my coat." At that moment, Salisbury grabbed Perry by the arm and put him in a headlock, thinking he might run. Perry's daughter, Caretha, responded by putting a rifle in the officer's belly. Salisbury instinctively brushed the weapon aside. In that intense moment, the gun fired, shooting the officer in the right arm. He retreated out the door and rolled on the ground to escape. Uh-oh, baby girl done put one in him. He caught a hot one. She wasn't playing. With only Perry's family inside, a hail of gunfire erupted in both directions. Two of Salisbury's men, Elmer McDaniels and Leo Brogard, were killed. They tried to storm the house and kick in the back door. Mama wasn't having it. The story goes that the family so valiantly defended their home that some were convinced there was a large group inside. So the mob retreated. They got scared. See, that's what they do. They got to get together to make a dent in anything, which I wish we would do more of. But they got scared. They couldn't handle it, so they backed off. So the mob retreated temporarily so that they could call in reinforcements. They needed help. So we got Moles, his sons, his daughter, and wife all up in there packing. Killed 2 of them for trying to bum rush the show and shot him. So they got additional manpower from the Klan and members of surrounding cities. They had to call in a whole militia, a makeshift militia, to save them from this man and his family. The Perry family used the 2 or 3 hour time to escape the house. July had been seriously wounded during the incident and fled with the help of his wife into a nearby sugarcane patch. Caretha remained in the house to tend to her injuries alone, while his 2 young sons hid in the barn. Around 50 cars. Now, y'all think about this. They needed 50 cars full of Klan members. They all came into Ocoee from towns such as Winter Garden, Orlando, Sanford. So the growing ad hoc militia was more largely populated by outsiders of Ocoee than those who lived in Ocoee. So they found 22-year-old Caretha in the house, and a manhunt then ensued, and Perry was soon caught and arrested. So they caught him, he was wounded, so, After being taken to Orlando General Hospital for treatment of the gunshot wound to his arm, Perry was released into sheriff's custody. Well, I think we know how that's going to end. And taken to jail in Orlando that night, probably near the old courthouse at Central and Magnolia. Well, a lynch mob descended on the jailhouse. How many times have we heard this story? Did we not hear this same story when we discussed the Oscarville, Georgia situation? It's amazing how these men get arrested and suddenly a mob is able to bum rush the show and take over. So the mob, just before dawn, came to the jail, and the sheriff, Frank Gordon, he gave them the keys to Perry's cell, and they immediately went and beat him half to death. They dragged him through the streets behind a car, and then they arrived at the entrance to Orlando Country Club near Lake Concord. Guess who lived there? Judge Cheney, the same man who told them that they would sue and all this other stuff. Okay, so in other words, they were sending Cheney a message as well. You send these black folks out here believing that they're going to be able to vote and do as they please, but we're going to hang him, right, so you can see, so you can understand that you're next. Speaking of Cheneys, how coincidental is it that Liz Cheney got a political lynching herself for supporting the truth, for not supporting the lie of the Klan? Poor Cheneys. Must be a thing with the Cheney name or something. I don't know. Anyway, the crowd, they strung him up. He was almost dead anyway. They strung him up to a telephone pole, and his hanging body was riddled with bullets, which may have been the actual cause of death. And this gruesome scene was left there as a warning to both Cheney and the area blacks, with an accompanying note saying, "This is what we do to niggers who try to vote." What is it with the hanging and the bullets? See, we did the same thing with the story of Oscarville, Georgia. They hung him, shot. They just used him for target practice. For nearly a week after the incident, KKK troops set up an embargo around the town. No one was permitted to enter or leave without their permission. Specifically, they sought to keep out the now homeless blacks from re-entering. In other words, if you left because you were running for your life and you got a house and cars or anything in there, that's not yours anymore. So the third of Ocoee's black population who owned their own land were never able to return to their properties. Those who were offered any compensation at all were forced to sell their land for pennies on the dollar. Hightower, for example, his other homie, the quiet one, the one that didn't bother nobody, They paid him $10 for a 37-acre tract of pine land in Claricona, Ocoee, and the family intended to use for manufacturing turpentine. So that land was essentially snatched away like it was never theirs to begin with. Within weeks of the incident, only 2 blacks remained in town, and by the 1930 census, there were none. In fact, not a single African American dared live in Ocoee until 1978. The city didn't hire its first black worker until 1986, and for 18 years following the 1920 massacre, not a single black vote was cast in all of Orange County. Until at least 1959, there was a sign posted at the town line that said, "Dogs and Negroes not welcome." And you wonder why they don't want to talk about critical race theory. Even up to the 1990s, there was a common bit of wisdom passed down among black families not to be caught in Ocoee after sundown. So this would essentially make Ocoee a sundown town. We talked about that before too, y'all. The narrative of the terror that for decades was obscured by whitewashing of the facts. You know, they don't want to tell the truth. They're going to tell you what they want you to hear. You understand? Reports say there was a race riot at Ocoee. The trouble was caused by Negroes. Now, this is the way the news reported it, y'all. The trouble was caused by Negroes who came as a group. And the unregistered Negroes came to the polls and demanded ballots. It all started when one man, Julius July Perry, came with a shotgun and demanded to vote. Now, there's nothing correct about no part of that story. But we're talking about white media and control of the narrative. Public officials, as well as the Orlando Sentinel and other accounts, for years referred to this violence as a race riot, often implying that the black community itself caused the violence rather than were the victims of it. Does that sound familiar? Here we go again. What happened in Central Florida 100 years ago is better called what was a massacre, instigated by a white mob who wanted to send a message to black voters. It was reported in the Associated Press. I didn't even know the Associated Press existed back then, but I know now. The Union Times that 50 carloads of men drove down from Orlando to help preserve order because the Negroes were out of control, because that's what they do. Yeah, okay. Ain't never been but one group out of control. The deputized mob and white volunteers burned 25 black homes, 2 churches, and a fraternal lodge. The total number dead is still unknown, but it's believed to be between 30 and 50. According to reports of white-run media and officials, the trouble was caused by a group of unregistered Negroes who came to the polls as a body and demanded ballots to vote. Anyway, Julius July Perry was age 50 at the time, and it made him the best-known victim of one of the worst episodes of Election Day violence. Election Day violence. Now, let's look back at history. When have we ever seen Election Day violence? He's the poster child for Election Day violence. And if there was any violence on Election Day, it was caused by the same damn people. Imagine that. And then we have, you know what's funny about January 6th, the certification of the election, is that most people didn't even know that that took place until Donald Trump, because he deliberately went out of his way to make sure that that was disrupted. Most people didn't even know that that was a thing. Most people civically didn't even understand that this even takes place as a formality for our elections. I met a guy in Houston this weekend as well, an instructor. One guy was an instructor, he was a teacher, but there was another guy standing next to me, younger guy, not too young. But we got to talking about, me and the educator, we began to discuss civics in schools and the times when civics in schools were actually a thing. And he goes, civics? They used to teach civics in school? Ooh. See, this is the problem today. This is why we have so much cognitive dissonance, why we have so much ignorance, because the things that are important are no longer being taught, because people are not being given good foundations. This is why people don't understand the actual process and why it's so damn important to cast a ballot as an individual. You know, when people talk about, oh, I ain't voting, it ain't gonna matter, are the same kind of people that if you handed them $1 million in $100 bills, oh, they would be elated. Give them $1 million in pennies and they'll be looking at you like you crazy. Each one of those pennies makes up 10 cents. And each of those dimes makes up $1. Each of those dollars makes up a $100 bill. But when your mind don't function like that, you think that you can negate pennies. You think that you can walk past a penny on the street and it doesn't mean anything. It means everything. That man was a farmer, a labor broker, a community leader. And he dared to register black voters. If 2020 was 1920, Stacey Abrams over there in Georgia, they would be blaming her right now for her own lynching. This is what we're talking about, y'all. Julius is his first name. July Perry. His prosperity, civic activities, and fearlessness are more than likely what put him in the mob's crosshairs. Now, according to his great niece, Sharon Cooley McWhite, he was lynched not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he'd done everything right. Now, lost to time and poor record keeping, intentional subversion, and deliberate whitewashing of events, the story of how hundreds of black families were driven from West Orange County community is now viewed as so unjust and horrific. Now, it's finally been determined that it was unjust and horrific, that it's become the subject of a formal letter of apology from the city of Ocoee to be offered to descendants and a historical marker placed there. I've seen the marker. It gives the story. It's pretty, even in short form, it's horrendous. So this year, the Florida legislature ordered the tragedy to be written into the textbooks of school children. What? They're going to actually teach the school children the truth? So much for critical race theory not being a thing. And the most in-depth exhibit ever curated on the tragedy is on display now at the Orange County Regional History Center. Ain't that something? So 50 people were murdered because they attempted to exercise their constitutional right. Now I want y'all to think about this. From the time of the end of slavery, people have tried and even defied white folks so that they can vote for their right to vote. And still to this day, we are going through trying and defying in order to cast our constitutionally given vote. We're still fighting for that. And I'm going to say this like I've always said before. If your vote did not count, trust and believe you would not be seeing them put in this much work. They are working overtime to keep you stupid. Sadly, many of us have given up. And we see no value in the sacrifices of the July Perrys of the world. That man lost everything in an attempt to fight for his right under the Constitution of the United States to vote. He made money. He was in fact very wealthy. His partners all made money and were in fact very wealthy. In fact, they were so wealthy that some white folks even envied them. That's the kind of money they was getting. Because despite popular belief, all white folks didn't have money. Just like all black folks don't have money. But we are so comfortable sitting back making jokes and talking about what don't count and being woke. I'm woke. You're sleepwalking. That's what you're doing. And you don't realize that the comfort of saying no to voting today is a direct result of the July Perrys and the Medgar Evers and the Martin Luther Kings of the world, all of whom lost their life for that right, for your right to say no, for your right to take for granted your existence in this country without any real representation, without any real opportunity to get what you want, always looking for they to fix it, for somebody to come along and fix it. It's not how this works, y'all. Just like black folks don't need leaders. You don't see no white folks running around talking about our leaders. We all are leaders. We lead ourselves. If we do the right thing, it automatically affects everything around us and everybody around us, and we become stronger and better. We got to change our thinking. Right now, the Civil Rights Act had been gutted, and it don't mean nothing anymore. Why? Why? Because voting has become more of a luxury than a necessity to some people. The cognitively dissonant who believe that their vote doesn't count. And that's why we have people in place that have the ability to gut civil rights acts and things of that nature. Without them being there, which means you would have had to vote for or put in place others who would make the difference. But you got to be a part of the process. If you're not a part of the process, you will only get what the results of that process is. And if you don't have a choice in it, it's just like people who don't serve on juries. Oh, I need money. I gotta go. No. How do you expect a person to be judged by a jury of their peers when there are none of us in the jury? You must be a part of the process if you want change. It's the only way. There is no other way. Not voting is not a form of protest. Get in there first and then make the changes. Not stand on the sideline and scream out, yeah, we'll see. It's not how this works. It's almost like thinking that your heart is going to keep beating when the blood is out of your body. You have to have both in order to stay alive. We got to vote, y'all. Cognitive dissonance is no longer acceptable, and critical race theory is a necessity. I can say this. I'm very excited about something that I've been noticing lately. I made the mistake of joining TikTok. And I say mistake only because I literally am on there sometimes so damn long that I feel funny. I feel crazy, like I need to get off of here. And what the thing is, I've run across more and more and more white folks who have been doing their homework, who literally know more about black history than a lot of black folks. And that, it excites me. I mean, it's bittersweet because I know that we need to know more about our own history, which will help us to move into the future. They're not going to teach it in schools. You can forget it. They're not. They are doing everything in their power to whitewash the truth. They're doing everything in their power to make Texas students believe that slaves were immigrants. They don't want you to know about the massacres across America during the 1920s that have robbed so many of generational wealth today. The gentleman whose last name is Perry, by the way, that I met in Houston this weekend, he explained to me how many people he has located property. Oh, I'm sorry. The property was there. He had to find out who belonged to the property in order to get them money that they had coming from mineral rights and stolen land from decades and decades ago. Oh man, it blew me away. It literally blew. This guy, he told me, and I'm going to have him on the show soon. He broke it down for me. He said, you got 30 great grands. I said, what does that mean? So he broke it down. He said, okay, you got a grandmother, you got a mother and a father, right? Okay, yeah. Okay. And your mother and father each have a mother and father. Those are your grandparents. So that's 4 grandparents right there. He said, and then each one of those has 4 grandparents. And he went down, he said, so you go back to 30. And I was like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. So he said, so somewhere down that line, there's property in your family. And somewhere I have to go back and I got to be able to trace from the person whose name was on that deed of that property. I got to go back and find every person in that line until I find the one that's alive that's got this money coming. And I ain't talking about no change. I'm talking about some money, money, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. Because you got people drilling on some of this land, and some of this land has what we refer to here in Texas as mineral rights. And it's not just Texas. It goes all the way out to New York and other places where they're drilling for gas and a bunch more stuff. And the fact is, when you buy a property, you think you own it all. You don't. You actually have to buy the mineral rights as well in order for you to own what's under that ground. So if a drilling company come in there and start drilling and you don't own the mineral rights, you don't get no money. The person who rightfully owns that property gets the money. Oh, baby. And guess how many people have lost property to situations like the Ocoee Massacre, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, like Oscarville, Georgia, who are entitled to that level of reparation, if not a federal reparation. Oh, baby. But see, when you start talking about critical race theory, these incidents start to come up and these things start to happen. He told me he gave a check to a man who didn't even know that the man that he was representing, who was long since passed, even existed. He never knew him, never knew his name, never knew anything about him. But this man was an ancestor of this man who was alive that he put that check in his hand. The history of America, y'all, is coming. It's coming full circle. That's just one example. There are many. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming in and hanging out and kicking it with me tonight. Y'all know I just try to give you what I got. I try to give you, as much of this reality and this truth as I possibly can so that, we can start to understand moving forward and building what we need to be building on, because, we can't keep going like this. Something's got to give. We've been fighting this fight for far too long. This is the Black Factor. This is an unapologetically black show with unapologetically black topics that I'm not going to ever lie to you about. I'm going to always give it to you in the raw, and I'm going to give it to you in the truth. I'm going to give it to you based in facts, not what I feel, not what I'm thinking. Of course, I do throw my opinion in there, but I'm just going to tell you straight up, it's going to be what it is. Black media. That's what you got right here. And I'm going to give it to you straight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, push all the buttons. Push the button. Whatever the button is, push it so you can make sure you're ready for my next show. We're going to come back in probably, maybe next Monday. If not, it'll be next Wednesday. But after which I'll be popping in and out, doing little lightweight segments. And then we're going to do our regular Wednesday show because we want to make sure we get everything covered. Ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate y'all. Y'all need to know I love y'all. When I'm in the street, listen to me. Let me say this before I go. When I'm in these streets, because there's been plenty of days, man, where I'll be wanting to get this up. It ain't nothing. Financially is nothing in this for me. Not yet. I hope one day somebody gonna pay me. But when I'm in these streets and people approach me and they say, "Oh man, the Black Factor," they be like, "Oh, man, I watch your show." When I get that kind of feedback right there, it keeps me going, y'all, because people have told me that they need what I got, that they are happy to hear the information. And as long as that keeps happening, I'm going to keep going. Because that way I don't feel like the things I'm saying are falling on deaf ears. And I know by the attendance on my show, the ones that I can see, because I can't see everybody, but the ones that I can see, I know just by that there are those. I got my diehards. I got my people who stick with me no matter what. And I love y'all. I love everybody that comes in and deals with this show and deals with these topics. So I just want you to know, as long as I can keep doing this, I'm going to keep rolling. All right? Man, look, love y'all. Everybody have a good night. Enjoy your weekend. And we going to get it done. Love, peace, and chicken.